All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the first Sustainability Summit on the Space Coast. This is an impressive group we have here. I wasn't prepared for this many people. My name is David Floyd. I am the chair of the City of Satellite Beach Sustainability Board, and I'm so glad you all can make it to our summit. We have an impressive lineup of speakers tonight. But before we get started, I wanted to just get a show of hands. How many of you were impacted by Hurricane Irma? Okay. How many of you were impacted by the 13 inches of rain that we had following Hurricane Irma? Okay. How many of you like kombucha? Me too. All right, all joking aside, we are starting to see real effects of climate change. And this year, especially with Hurricane Harvey and all the devastation to the islands, it's really starting to hit home that we need to start doing something about this. So the City of Satellite Beach has taken some steps, and we hope you guys follow suit with us and join us in this effort, because it doesn't look like the federal government or the state government is going to help us out much. So before we get started, I want to introduce our mayor, Frank Pino. Come on up, Frank. He's going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing.
First, thank you very much for coming out tonight. This is an incredible turnout. The Sustainability Board, I know there's a lot of information being given, but I can tell you of all the boards that I've ever been associated with, this was by far the easiest to get going. And it sounds crazy, but I've been here in the town a long time, from the beginning actually. My parents came here as one of the first people. And I was involved in a lot of things. But I always know we struggle to get people to help on a lot of different boards. When this came up, this idea came about, really, we started doing community meetings. We wanted to really engage into our community, and not necessarily the sustainability part. So we went out and had meetings. We didn't have meetings here at City Hall. We went out to the community, to their grounds, close to their neighborhoods. And all of a sudden, we've got this whole group of people that cared about other things than what we were doing that we never touched base with. And that's what started our sustainability. Of all the boards, we have so many people applying for the board. It's full all the time. And from that, there's branches that have come off that board, committees, to do things. And I can tell you this, you've done the first step because you're here and you care about your community. And it's, to me, I've never seen anything easier. We've got incredible staff that makes up this board. And my staff, first I want to thank the staff here tonight from our city. They're incredible. Courtney and her group, they're an incredible job. And I'll tell you, it's definitely worth it. The lagoon, everything about the sustainability and what it's about. I always had people say, well, climate change doesn't exist. That's fine, but I always ask them the question, do you want clean water? Do you want clean air? Do you want a clean earth? You don't have to like or dislike climate change, but all those things are things that people I know in my community want. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, and I realized that I never introduced myself. I'm Courtney Barker, the city manager for the City of Satellite Beach. And before we get started with the first presenter, I'm going to hand this back to Dave in a minute. But I wanted to introduce some of our elected officials and city officials that are here. And Ryan Anderson, a council member with City of Palm Bay, is here. Carolyn Willis, councilwoman from Cocoa Beach, City of Cocoa Beach. Dick Dunn, councilman from Indiana. Another Indian Land Councilman, Stu Glass. Andrea Young, with a councilwoman from West Melbourne. Bob Daniels, Melbourne Beach Town Manager. Craig Burton, Indian Harbor Beach Council Member.
Mark sends his regrets, he's in Tallahassee, legislative action, otherwise he'd be here.
Great. See, and Frank used to be my coach at Southern High School. Christian Alt, Indian Atlantic City Manager. John Tikanich, Cocoa City Manager. Coco's Assistant City Manager, Matt Furr. Jimmy Knight, City of Cocoa Beach City Manager. And Peggy Busaka, Community Development Director at the City of Titusville. And I just also wanted to point out that we have a representative from our Space Coast TPO, Sarah Crom, here. And then we also have tabling tonight, we have Maple Street natives, who we love. Marine Resources Council, basically the people who do all of our data collection and everything we need, anytime we need it. And KBB, of course, and then Tony Sasso, Director of KBB, is here also. There's we also have set up out there a display from Brevard Solar. So if you all want to see the solar panels that will be going on our City Hall, you can do that. And then I also wanted to point out that we have two businesses here tonight that I think, there may be more and I just don't know, but I wanted to point them out. Camilla Greco from Verde Eco School is here. Rebecca with Waste Management is also here. So, point out two organizations that are here tonight that you may not know what they do, and I think they're important pieces of our community, and they are all focusing on Green Initiative, are the two that I want to point out. And the first one I'm going to hand over the mic to is Danielle Bowden. And she is with the Space Coast Realtors Association, and is also happens to be a community, the Citizens Oversight Committee member on the Lagoon Tax with, and serves on that board with me. So,
Thank you. Ready? It's not working, so I'll speak up loudly. I chair the Green Committee for Space Coast Association of Realtors, and I just wanted to say that our goals are in alignment with the matrix that you guys have created. We have things in MLS like electric car charging stations, Florida-friendly yards, different features for MLS with certifications like LEED. And that is our goal, to stay in alignment so that realtors and appraisers have the data that they need to place value on property accordingly. And without that, we won't see the just value with sustainable movements. So, thank you.
MJ Waters is the president of the Brevard Indian River Lagoon Coalition, and I just wanted her to kind of introduce her organization. They've been instrumental in a lot of the lagoon things that we've been doing, and some of you may not know about them, so
Thank you. So we are a coalition of approximately 20 to 30 different organizations, most of whom you've heard speak, or they have a table tonight, including Satellite Beach. We were formed about 3 or 4 years ago, but we got very active when the sales tax referendum went on the ballot. And we worked with the realtors, the boaters, the fishermen, the businesses, to get that tax passed, and we played an educational role in that. And now what we do is continue to work with all these partner groups to try to bring our voices together so they're more effective and more powerful when it comes to the lagoon. A lot of us have been also very involved in forming the sustainability boards that many of you are getting ready to start or working on. So one of the things I just want to say is what we brought tonight, and we're back there at that table, is a list of all of the non-governmental organizations in Brevard County who are ready to help you. So if you want a panel on solar, if you want a panel on rethink energy, if you want a panel on climate change, we have the contacts for you on one page. You can take that with you, and hopefully it will help you kind of jumpstart the board. Thank you.
to let all of you know that there are, I believe, 4 for office that are attending tonight's meeting. And before we leave tonight, I want them to be able to have, stand up and introduce themselves, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm campaigning for them, because I'm not. I just think it's important that everybody knows, who's coming up in your election. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and then we'll get to that in a later date, or a later time.
Thank you, Courtney. Okay, so tonight we're going to bring together all the different environmental or sustainability boards from the different cities. So I'd like to invite them up here at this time. The first one is Palm Bay. We have a representative from Palm Bay. And you can just take one of these seats up here. We also have Cocoa Beach, Cocoa, Melbourne, Indialantic, and Titusville. Have I missed anybody? Melbourne? Or Melbourne Beach? Come on up. So the goal of this summit is to get together with all the different cities and learn from each other and establish some common goals or some regional goals that we would like to do countywide. So what we're going to ask each city is to just, if they feel comfortable, is to give us a brief just what their goals have been and what achievements they've been able to accomplish. So we're going to start with Cocoa Beach. I'm sorry, you are Todd Swing.
Okay, so we'll go through this real quick. This is a little bit of a sneak peek of the materials we've put together. We've been in existence, just came into existence last year. Been working on developing what will become our sustainability plan. So we're not there, we don't have an adopted plan yet, but this is a sneak peek of where we've gotten to over that time period. The Sustainability Committee members, Carol Auer, Jessica Brusso, Robert Day, myself, and Carolyn Wainwright, and then we cannot forget our staff representative, Christy Hawkins. We were fortunate, the City Commission laid out for us a lot of what the goals of the commission was, and these are straight from the enabling resolution that Cocoa Beach will be mindful of responsibility of residents and future generations. We want to build a distinctive world-class small city with a vision to ensure quality and sustainability, committed to continuously improve environmental management, and expect that culture and actions of the city reflect environmental sensitivity and responsibility. So we felt like, and I didn't read those all word for word, but it was a very good start in that we had, as a sustainability committee, we got good direction from the commission on what their intent was. Some unique parts of the ecosystem that several of us as coastal communities do share is we're a barrier island. We've got beach and dune portions of our community. The Indian River Lagoon system, we've already talked, that's a huge part of what we're end up dealing with. Maritime hammocks, and we're fortunate we have Lori Wilson, across Lori Wilson Park, and then we have now the Maritime Hammock Preserve that we work on and are continuing to enhance. Marsh and mangrove and seagrass areas, and then the other part is the developed community. It interfaces with environment through the use of energy, water, and generation of waste and stormwater. As we met as a committee, we established a variety of guiding principles. I think these probably apply to almost everybody, but sustainability is a journey, it's never static. Our program maturity is going to evolve. What we are today is not what we'll be tomorrow. It'll continue to grow. Keep the plan simple. That was very important to the committee. Prioritize and focus our energy. Seek community input. The community will shape the future of our plan. Stakeholders have different priorities and motivations. We have a lot of people that are very interested in sustainability. There's other people that don't know they're interested yet. And so we have to work with allowing people to understand why it's important and how, whether they are truly a someone that's interested in sustainability, how it benefits them in their life and the community they live in. Our initial focus is driven by environmental topics, but we recognize that sustainability incorporates social, economic, and environmental considerations, and will focus locally, but we recognize that this contributes to global challenges. We highlighted a number of areas, both impact areas and stakeholder areas, and this is what makes it so complex. There's different things that we need to work on, but there's so many groups that ultimately we touch and will affect our success. So we identified the impact areas as energy, land, water, waste, and our impact areas across a number of locations: homes, businesses, visitors, government, which all come together to be the community as a whole. You heard some about ranking and prioritizing. These were the criteria that we came up with and started working to come up to make recommendations to the commission. Impact, what will have a substantial local impact? Timeliness, can we see results? Buy-in, what are our priorities that will engender community support? Resources, recognizing that government's constrained, so being able to use existing resources, volunteers, and partners. And then cost, what is things that are cost effective, that they're either low cost or high payback, and they're likely to be supported. And we landed on these as our prioritized focus areas. And again, these are draft because they have not yet gone to our commission, and we're working to set up a workshop with our commission to have discussion. But you see, this is a little bit of a blend. It's not just what we're going to focus on, we're going to do energy, or it's the thing, we grouped things together in a way that we thought we could focus our execution of getting things done. You heard education, that scored the highest and of everything we ranked, and you heard about rankings. We came up with, I think, 69 different actions that we thought we could take, and we distilled those down to about 19 that would be recommended as priorities. But education was by far the leader and scored, we used essentially a Six Sigma ranking technology, and they scored 9. It's the highest score across the board on all of our criteria. Partnerships and recognition, so who can we, you heard not reinventing the wheel, major part of what we're doing to want to partner with MRC and KBB and Waste Management and all of those that are out there that are already working in those impact areas that we identified as our needs for improvement. City government, facilities and operations, it's the one place that the city absolutely controls is how they behave in their facilities and operations, and so that's a big part. But I think, and you heard about that, it can be cost effective too. There's a lot of value to the city to be able to deploy some of these options. And then last, water quality and stormwater, and that's the one just purely technical area that we identified that just has such a major impact on our community and the region, and so that was the fourth focus area that we had. And that really, that's where we're at, and within each of these then we have specific actions similar to the tables that you saw for Satellite Beach, and that we'll be working on, get buy-in from our commission and then start to work on executing those. One of the big strategies is really to engage the community to help execute each of these items. So it's rather than just going and doing individual things, a lot of our strategy is really to build that broad support and hopefully create that groundswell to move forward.
Thank you. If you would just hold your questions till the end, we're going to have a question and answer period at the very end of this. So our next city is the city of Cocoa. And realize that all these cities may be in different stages of development of their sustainability or green committees. So, but that was impressive what you guys did.
And City of Cocoa is one of those. We're very embryonic. And that in December of this past year, we adopted the resolution, because the council did, to create the Sustainability Advisory Committee. We're currently seeking the applications are out there for committee members, up to 11 committee members, no more than 11, 5. And their first order of business is to create a sustainability and resiliency plan, and in the adopting of the enabling resolution, council provided considerations and we can guidance as it pertains to what that plan should contain. So at this point, that's the actual photo from December 12th, that council meeting, and the city council adopted the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
But I think what is unique about Cocoa versus Satellite Beach is that we have a community twice the size, but with socioeconomic incomes that are much lower. So our big challenge is going to be making sustainability work for everybody. And that's what
Okay, next is the City of Melbourne. We have, oh, that's right, the City of Melbourne, I don't think was going to speak, but it looks like they have adopted a resolution to continue to increase its investments in energy efficiency, implement additional programs to increase resiliency and decarbonize the local economy, and to stand for environmental justice. I believe this committee was just formed, right? Or they're still forming it? Okay. Okay, but, let's see. Yeah, they want to establish an all-volunteer sustainability board, which will have the responsibility to improve the city's climate, resilience, and environmental quality, and to develop a roadmap to 100% clean energy by 2035. Wow, that's impressive. Indy Atlantic? Vinny?
I'm not going to use the mic. I saw my doctor today. He said my blood pressure was too low. My name is James Rondo. I'm the chairman of the Indy Atlantic Environmental Advisory Task Force. Also on our task force, we have Bill DeLucia, Sandy Brown, Alicia McKay, Amy McLaughlin, Lorraine Schulte, and of course our town manager, Kristen O, who is here. I told him I put his name in lights. He hates that. So he loves carrot wood though. So if you ever have pictures of carrot wood, send them to him. We got him hostage. But anyway, so we were formed in December of 2016, and one of the a few of the big things we had when we were formed is we saw things in the community that we wanted to change. One of them was we were providing swales to all our residents. The city was. The concern that we had is that they were digging the hole, and then they were putting the St. Augustine grass right back into the and not that that's bad, because, you know, some people just don't know, or they just don't see the value in it. So one of the first things we did is come up with, I don't know, it must have been like 25 swale designs with different types of ground, different types of side, coquina, mulch, and then we also had different types of native plants that would help with the nutrient load. So we figured if a town is going to be doing something, if the town's going to be spending money doing something, let's try to get the most out of it that we can. And of course, some of our designs are expensive, and the town may not be able to afford those. So what we're going to do is we want to offer that to the residents and say, look what you can do. You can have a swale as kind of basically a bicycle track, or you can swale it, put some nice coquina, and maybe some really beautiful colored flowers, native flowers, that will not only help with the environment, but they'll draw in, you know, some of the native animals, butterflies, and all those things that help make our community sustainable. So that was one of the big things that we had when we started. We also had Lily Park. I don't know if any of you know or have seen on Nextdoor, which is a social media site. Everybody thinks it's an alligator wrestling pit, and I keep waiting there to wrestle an alligator. It hasn't showed up yet. But we built a retention pond, and it's big, and it's on Riverside. So we figured, again, rather than just dig it and St. Augustine it, let's go ahead and do some work on it. So we saw these actions being taken by the town, and we said, let's see if we can maximize these. So we've gone ahead, like I said, we were formed in December of 2016. We've come up with a bunch of new swale designs. We've worked with the zoo, this was before us. Keith, thank you, back there. They did the oysters, living shoreline, along Douglas Park, 192 and Riverside. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to continue that and do an upland shoreline. So now we're also going to go back from the seawall up with a whole bunch of native plants. We also have a shade garden. It's also a lot of native plants. So that was one of the things. We have another park, Dewey Park. which is kind of this odd triangle. Anybody who tries to navigate around Indiana, you can kind of get caught doing 2-3 turns and you're back where you started. So we decided to turn that again into a native plant garden, and that way attract some of that butterflies and the different types of animals. And then we have Orlando Park. Some of you might have come and visited. There is a stop sign on the northwest corner. And from there, directly west, we drew up a design for a 30-foot swale garden as well. So there'll be a swale there to stop cars, or hopefully encourage cars to not park by the stop sign where they're not supposed to anyways. But along with that, and rather than putting up a no parking sign, let's put a swale, let's go ahead and decorate it with some native plants and stuff. And one of the big things, anyone that knows me, I'm huge on education. I know Todd was saying how important education was. So we've started going through and taking out some of the invasive plants and species in our parks. So rather than just cutting trees down and people not knowing what's going on, we actually put a sign, Chris, good sign, good idea. We put a sign that says, "Excuse our mess while we remove invasive plants." So we're starting the conversation right there. We're meeting people right where they are. And then, here's a preview. This is coming out to all the residents at the end of the month to go along with Natural Invasive Species Month. And it's our Indiana most invasive. So we've done 4 of the biggest, careful, you got those, Tony, don't you? That's not good. That is great. So anyway, so this is going to go out in our county letter to every resident, double-sided. What we wanted to do is not only, again, point out, start talking about it, but we wanted to actually have a call of action. So what we did on the right side is you'll see your call of action is right on top. Please remove invasive plants from your property, not public property, or your neighbor's property, and replace it with Florida alternatives like these. So not only are we telling people remove these, but we're saying plant these. Because a lot of times you tell people, oh, you shouldn't have that tree there. Well, what should I have? So we feel like not only pointing out the problem, but giving people the solution. So, and as Courtney said, this flyer, I'll make available to anybody. It's a Photoshop file. You want to take out Indialantic and put your municipality, that'd be great. Send it around. We've got to get the conversation going, and hopefully this will start it. And I won't find too many of these most invasive with my picture placed around the town, right? Cut my head out. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot. That's really, I really like your ideas on swales. The city of Satellite Beach is definitely looking into swales. And we've also heard some horror stories about other cities that have implemented swales. So this is great information that we should...
We've given them this. Nick, you got our swale designs, right?
Yeah, we're using it for our projects, and I'll put flyers out for our projects we're going to do on DeSoto, and the NAS program we're also going to do with Residents of the Lagoon for a $500 small plant grant for lagoon lawns on the lagoon side to vegetate with phosphorus to reduce stormwater. So I'll put out a whole bunch of flyers out there. You guys take a look at those on your way out. Thanks to the NEP for the funding.
All right, next, we have the city of Palm Bay. Unfortunately, the photo didn't come out, but do we have a representative from? Okay.
All right, hello, good night, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is awesome. This is a great show of support. I want to thank Courtney, her staff, the Satellite Beach City Council and Mayor for getting this ball rolling, because it seems like it's rolling through Brevard pretty fast. For me, it was a no-brainer to bring forward a sustainability ordinance that would establish a sustainability board. The reasons are twofold. One, I have 3 kids, and I think they need the planet better than I found it, so that's the way I intend on leaving it to them. Way better. Actually, they can go to the lagoon and use it again. My father used to go clamming in there, and I probably wouldn't right now, so that's why I'm happy about the sales tax, and I know everybody hates tax. So we need to get in, dig in as a community, and do what we can do. We're establishing our board at the next city council meeting, which is February 15th. The second reason it was a no-brainer is because in 2009, Palm Bay already did a sustainability plan and it's star rated. In 2011, that plan was updated. It's easy for me to bring forward the ordinance. It's the people behind the ordinance that make it happen. That's why Deshawn is up here. She actually initiated that plan, got that plan rolling, contracted out that plan, and I'm hoping she's gonna help our board update that plan. So I wanted her to speak a little bit on that.
I can't take credit for the work. I didn't actually do a lot of work, but I appreciate that sentiment. In 2009, we decided as a community, or actually as a municipality, to do FGBC. So when we applied for FGBC, we said, hey, why don't we do a master plan? We found some gaps and we did some business. And we modified like ball fields, lighting, and then we came with this wonderful idea to create this new building that we call the Annex. And it's LEED certified, it just does not have the seal. But that's one of the things that we did do to move our municipal activities towards a more greener and sustainable lifestyle. We created a master plan, we modified, we do greenhouse gas emissions every 4 years based off of municipal activities. So in 2015, when STAR came out, or actually when we were asked to join STAR, it was almost like, that sounds wonderful, but we're only doing it for the municipality, we're not doing it for the whole community. And one thing that STAR does, and what our master plan didn't do in the beginning, was talk about what happens in the community as a whole. And the community is where all the activities mean something. It's the primary movement of sustainability. I mean, if you don't have your triple bottom line defined by your people, your stakeholders, the businesses, the mom, the dads, the schools, and everybody involved, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's when we said, you know, we need to move this forward. So in 2014, when I was tasked to update the Sustainability Master Plan, I was like, I don't think I can do that. So I had a lot of conversations. I spent last year talking to different businesses, trying to get them on board, start partnerships, and it just wasn't moving. So I'm very excited to see that I already have a councilman who's strongly behind this one and will help us move forward. So when we go into 2019, and reapply for a STAR certification, we will have more of a community involvement and we will be that 3rd or 4th star. I'm hoping for 4 stars. But we are 3 stars now, but I'm hoping for 4 stars in the coming year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, City of Palm Bay. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what the City of Satellite Beach has been doing. Okay, so one of the big things that we did recently was we created a community garden. It's called the Logos Community Garden, and we also have a sister garden at FIT that our intern Zach and others from FIT have created. So that was a great event. We've got raised beds. We have a rainwater collection system that I helped design. We have a shade house, and we're also thinking about turning it into somewhat of a city garden where we are growing native plants that we will either offer for free to citizens that are either willing to get rid of their St. Augustine yards, or we'll use them throughout the city to basically practice what we preach and get rid of the grassy areas that we have. We also recently, right up front here, it might be hard to see, but in the pond in front of the City Hall here, we started putting in some what were they, like, where's the name?
What, this mangrove?
Yeah, what type of plants did we put in there? They
Yeah, all
were
native plants, and it's part of the, like, living shoreline mentality that a lot of the, NERC team is thinking about, Northeastern Restoration Team, which is Brevard County, from, north of Brevard down, and even outside of Brevard County.
Yeah, we have mangroves and all kinds of grasses and beach sunflower, river vine. It was awesome when we did it. It was a huge community event. We got a bunch of heavy equipment out there, and it came together pretty good. Besides that, we're also putting solar on City Hall, on these buildings that we're in right now. So we hope to have, I guess, net zero City Hall. So. Do you want to answer that one, Nick? The return on investment?
Pretty close to the microphone.
So actually, the city spends for this building, we call it the complex. This is Civic Center and City Hall right next door. About $13,000 a year in electric costs. When we bid out the solar, we were able to get an 8-year return on investment, even with financing it. So that, I mean, it's a no-brainer because it's a 30-year product, and we're saving the rest of that money in electric costs for our residents. So the taxpayer is actually saving a lot of money by putting solar on right now. So that's the benefit. We have a capital program now for solar. So every time we replace a roof on a building, we're adding solar to that building. And any new building is built with solar now.
Okay, so besides that, we also have an electric car charging station, which I actually saw somebody use tonight, which was awesome. No, it was somebody else, yeah. And the city has our first electric vehicle. So we purchased a 2015 Chevy Volt, which is really cool. We drove it over to the Sustainability Symposium in Orlando. And that was a great event. If any of you had the opportunity to see it, it's also, I think, available online, right, or somewhere.
Green Builder.
Green Builder who sponsored it. So yeah, if you want to go learn more about sustainability, that's a great place to go. I learned a tremendous amount. Came out of there super inspired to go out and do great things in my community. Did I miss anything?
Garden, solar. We also have the appeal project as part of the solar that we're doing at College Park. The slide isn't plain, so trust me, there's a really nice rendering of FPL's canopy that's going to go up at Pelican Park.
Yeah, so we have a pretty large sustainability board now. I think we are, how many members? 7?
Last night we filled up, yeah.
Okay. And we have some alternates and some liaisons and a full-time photographer with drones and all kinds of, it's great and it's super fun, I might add. I love going to these meetings. It's not, and you should come attend them. A lot of times we invite speakers and we learn a lot and we get a lot done. So you guys already met Courtney, our city manager. Julie's our assistant. Where is she? She's hiding. And Nick is our environmental programs coordinator, if you have not met him yet. So he's a full-time city employee who does nothing but environmental programs and assists in events like this and solar and just about everything else that we can't do as the board. Okay, so now, actually I have one thing I want to mention before I turn this back over to Courtney and Rochelle. On each table there is was it an index card? Okay, so there's index cards, and what we'd like you to do is, out of this, we're trying to get 3 items that together as a regional group, or that we could work on together. Maybe swales, something like that. Whatever you think would be a good thing that we could coordinate together and collaborate on. So I'm going to turn this over to Courtney.
So we have those index cards largely because we want to hopefully, when you're thinking about sustainability, obviously the impacts of your actions, should cross the borders and hopefully partner with your neighboring, cities and counties. So we're hoping that we could come up with 3 large, broad ideas that we could all work towards together. And so we were hoping that you could write down 3 ideas on those index cards, and we'll compile those and send them to each of the boards. So we can all start talking about how we can collaborate together, and whatever topics are the most common, we might want to start there of what we all desire to do. So, whether that's renewable energy or transit or, stormwater and swales, anything that we can all work together on that has, probably think a little bit more regionally. Even though we have beach erosion problems here, Palm Bay probably doesn't think about that. So we might want to, think about things that are countywide that we can all work together on. So I'm going to let Nick cover real quick, not Nick, Zach, about the community garden real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing about the Logos Community Garden. That garden, like Dave said, is a sister garden to the Florida Tech Ethos Community Garden. And there's going to be another sister garden, Pathos, in Cocoa Beach, coming up April, May, later? Soon. Very soon. But the reason I'm bringing this up in the spirit of collaboration and whatnot is we want to turn these 3 gardens into a community garden network. Basically branching out across Brevard with other community gardens to basically empower them, give some resources to them, more advertisements, manpower and whatnot, and just basically collaborate a network that hasn't been generated really. Something that's very public, and maybe could go to other counties and across the state. So I just want to give a shout out to that concept.
Thank you. We were just going to really quick go through some of the other implementation parts of what the city's doing. We have done a lot of resiliency planning, climate resiliency planning in our community. We started that back in 2009, well before I got here. And so we started out with sea level rise studies, and then now we've done 2 vulnerability studies, and we're now moving into taking that information and plugging it into our stormwater plans and things like that. So we have a stormwater plan that is now being created based on sea level rise projections in our community. And that's largely because if you're here in Satellite Beach during a hard rain, you'll see the river backing up into Jackson Avenue. You'll see river backing up into Cassia, and that's because the river is now becoming a little bit higher than the outfalls. So those are some of the issues that we're addressing with our stormwater master plan. And then also, pipe sizes, we're trying to purchase land for ponds, things like that. So that's one part. We're also looking at, we're actually moving facilities. We're moving our fire station because of flooding. So we're addressing really very real impacts with this issue. Part of that is, the public side, even though it is hard, is actually easier than addressing the private side. So to deal with that, we put together what we call a climate ambassador team, which is an ad hoc committee of just residents that were interested in serving. And we have been going through issues in our land development regulations one after another. And so we're now making pretty big changes to our comp plan to address coastal construction setbacks, trying to move the buildings away from the ocean to address erosion. We're looking at shifting density and development rights from South Patrick Drive, which is the most flooded area of the community, over to A1A. We're looking at a lot of things, and I'm going to let Rochelle come up and talk about Rochelle's our consultant that we hired to help us through this, and she's going to just kind of go through some of the specifics with you, so you have some ideas of the issues that we're facing as a community, not just from a sustainability, but also resiliency. And even though that a lot of people kind of treat those as 2 separate issues, for us they're very much entwined, because we really can't talk about being sustainable if we don't address climate resiliency at the same time. So I'm going to turn that over to her.
Thank you, Courtney. Good evening, everyone. It is so great to see this turnout. Most of you have seen my face around this county for 38 years now, and this is a very exciting time for us and for me as part of this community. I've lived here since 1988, and Most of you know that I have been involved in a lot of redevelopment activities, and that's all about sustainability. And one of the problems that we have here in this community, Cocoa Beach has it, Palm Bay has it, Cocoa has it, everyone has it. You have a lot of older, substandard, dilapidated maybe, deteriorating maybe, lots and parcels that are not contributing, A, to your economy in a positive way, or B, contributing to the, and they are contributing in a negative way to the environment. We have seas of parking. How many of you have just massive parking lots in your community? If you don't all raise your hand, you're not, if you don't have your eyes open, you're in another world. How many of you, when you look at those parking lots, think, gosh, where does that stormwater go? Yep. So what we're trying to do, and from Zach's GATS and the sustainability plan, we have identified very specific areas within our codes. Some are big ticket items. They're going to take a while. They're going to take, charter review. They're going to be problematic. But there's some low-hanging fruit that I would encourage you all to look at as you're beginning this implementation process, which is part and parcel of your planning. If you don't implement, it's just another plan on the shelf. So, what do you think of when you think of low-hanging fruit? And tell me how much time I have, so you can kick me out of here. First of all, well, as Courtney said, for us, dealing with the CCCL, and just instead of allowing people to have variances to go eastward, we're going to shift their envelope forward and make it very easy for them to build back if they need to. Landscaping. How many of you have a restriction on the amount of native landscape that you allow on your properties in your codes? I bet more of you than you really know. So that's one area to look at. Parking. We always have, these minimum parking standards, 1 per 200 square feet, 1 per 300 square feet. We have learned as planners, city managers over the years, you don't really need that much. And maybe what you need to do is create some maximums within the code so that you create some more green space, you create areas for stormwater management, and you can come in and retrofit some of these older sites that you're dealing with. How many of you know whether or not your city requires new houses or homes to have 2-car garages? Every one of them, I can tell you, I've worked in every city. Every one of them does. Why? Why do we need 2-car garages anymore? Because what? Get a storage unit. But you have to do what's best for your own community, and what I'm telling you may not work in your community, and that's what it's all about, is figuring out what's going to work in your own backyard. So things that we're looking at is maybe we don't need to require all of that lot coverage and that impervious surface on these parcels, particularly as we get new development. Looking at setbacks, things of that nature. Paving. Of course, other low-hanging fruit is just doing green building. Looking at incentivizing LEED certifications, using the STAR program, there's probably 40 different green building codes or green building standards that you can use. Florida Green Building Coalition. There's just a litany of them. So you can look at all of those. How many of you actually allow a charging station in your code? Some of you do, some of you might not. So that's another piece of low-hanging fruit. There really are a lot more electric cars that are coming on the road. So some of the big ticket items are going to be a lot more difficult to deal with. And those are allowing for washout first floors. If you've ever been to the Low Country in South Carolina, if you've been to Key West, if you've been to Cedar Key, if you've been to any of these communities, they are riverine or beachside communities that allow you to go up. so that the water, whether it's from a hurricane or a flood or a rain event, the water can go through. We don't allow that. I mean, it's unthinkable that a community on the beach wouldn't allow that. So it's going to take a lot of psychological and political and people changes to begin to think differently about how we use the land. And I can tell you that my in-laws, if their house hadn't been up on stilts, it wouldn't be there after Hugo. And the concrete block one that was a surface home across the street from them is gone. Okay, but theirs on stilts lasted. So how do we do that? So that's not just, that creates other problems. It's a ripple effect. Because if you're going to raise the house in order to get stormwater underneath, in order to get parking underneath, or the business, to have under drains and parking underneath and swales and stormwater on these old parcels, what do you have to do? You have to go up. And for some reason, there is this huge fear of heights in this county. I mean, if you think about it, no, I'm going to go there. So, one thing leads to another. So if you're going to allow things to go up and build in new ways to be resilient and sustainable and to protect the environment and to create better stormwater management and less parking, you have to look at the other things. And one discounts the other. So if you can't go up, you're not going to get that sea of parking rolled up and new things happening. So those are things that we're looking at. And of course, you know, allowing and encouraging, incentivizing some of these kinds of programs are one of the things that we're looking at. So if you I've done this in some other communities, it's really just a form-based code, performance-based system where you decide what you want, and then you, as kind of minimums, and then you look at what would be really great to have and how you can encourage a redevelopment or a new development project to do that. What do you need to give them? You may need to give them some more units to make it feasible. You may need to give them a little height to make it feasible. You may need to reduce some of the other requirements in order to make that project feasible. So it's whatever really works in your community. And I think I'm going over my time. Courtney and I and Jason are doing a webinar for 1,000 Friends of Florida on February 21st that you may want to, it's a free webinar that you may want to plug into. And also for the local government folks that are here, the National League of Cities has gobs of information and checklist after checklist after checklist. So whether you're looking at fleet management or land use and smart growth principles that you can integrate for resiliency and sustainability, it's there for the taking along with 45 other gazillion places. Courtney and I love to help people, and I know that I would be glad to come and sit down with any of you, just, you know, on my own time to just, you can bounce ideas, we can talk about things to look at. And I think that's it. So good luck out there. It's easy. You can do it.
You know, when we start talking about height with our community, you know, people start imagining Miami, and we're not talking about Miami. And even though Orlando's beautiful, a lot of people in our community don't want to see, you know, the real tall buildings. And what we're really talking about is 10 to 15 feet for the most part. So allowing people to go up one floor so they can fit the stormwater and parking underneath. And you know, but that's still really hard because people, and I'm a planner, and I think most of the planners in the room, Peggy will agree, people fear the future, and then in doing so, they'll romanticize the past. And that's where, you know, you get the crowded rooms of people scared of what, you know, their community's gonna change. And the fear is totally understandable. So if you start looking at those processes and start going through the process, just keep in mind that the fear is totally normal, and you just have to work through with the community to make sure they understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and making sure that you're doing it for the environment and really no other reason. You know, the one thing I wanted to also emphasize is that one thing that we've realized since starting our board and you know, with the Facebook page, and Dylan back there is not only one of our board members, but he also does all our videos and Facebook and everything else. When we started doing that, we realized that we really need to walk the walk first before we ask residents to change themselves. So when, for example, we got rid of all of our invasives on our public property before we started asking people to get rid of the invasives off their property. We stopped fertilizing our parks before we stopped asking people, or started asking people to stop fertilizing their yards. And the reason why we did that is nothing makes people more mad than when you put something on Facebook saying, you should stop fertilizing, that's bad, and then they walk by Pelican Beach Park and they see Public Works doing it. It's infuriating to them. And so one of the reasons why we invited Keith Winston with Brevard Zoo is no organization, I think, really emphasizes walking the walk more than Brevard Zoo. They have done so much to demonstrate how you can be kind to the environment and educate the public, I think more than most organizations, definitely in Brevard County and the East Coast. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a more environmentally conscious zoo ever. And then also to participate the way he does in everything that we do around the county. So I wanted to invite him up and ask him to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives they're doing, because a lot of these things are things that we can partner with them on.
Thank you, Courtney. I wish that was true. I wish we were one of the greener zoos. We're not, actually. I really wish, but the high esteem from you, I really appreciate that. I actually thought it might be useful tonight to build on that, to sort of tell my sustainability story and the zoo sustainability story, because it's a story I think we can all relate to. And I will tell you a few things to start with. One is that everything I know about sustainability boards, I just learned in the last hour. I know nothing about sustainability boards. I know a little something about sustainability, but what I actually know something about is behavior change, how you change people's behaviors. And so I started on this journey when I got my first zoo job, and I got it at Roger Williams Park Zoo. And the guy who hired me, who's since been a wonderful friend and mentor, but really scared the crap out of me when I first started working for him, he told me I got the job because of all the candidates he asked, how do you change people's behavior? It was for a director of education position. I was the only one who said, wow, that's a really great question. I have no idea. Because we really didn't have much of an idea at that point. One of my first educations on that matter was by a guy named Rich Block, who runs the Santa Barbara Zoo. If you read in the paper about the fire in December at the zoo that had to evacuate, that was Rich's zoo. I was actually visiting him the day before the fire broke out. But early on, Rich worked for the World Wildlife Fund, and I started asking him questions. How do you change people's behaviors? And he said, well, you know, Keith, the way I like to think about it is we are faced with a multitude of environmental choices every day. And if everyone just made the best choice they could, whenever they could, because you can't make the right choices all the time. It would have been really hard for me to bicycle over here tonight. You can't, it's impossible. But if we all were conscious about making the best choices we could every time we could, it would change the world. And that is, I think, how people work and how we work. And so, you know, the first choice I started making all the time, a long time ago, was double-siding paper and writing my notes on scrap, right? How many of you do that? Right? Pretty easy, pretty low-hanging fruit. Now I have my notes. Other ones we do along the way. One of the things the zoo got beaten up on actually had to do with swales. Who had the swale story tonight? We had to redo parking. We had to add parking at the zoo. and we paved a big area, and I got a really nasty email from someone who, I knew the name, but I don't know, they're probably in this room. I really couldn't put a face. They were really distraught with us. And I will tell you, I wanted to tell that person ever since, listen, we thought really hard about it. We priced out permeable pavers. We could not afford it. We could not make the best possible decision. But if they had looked really hard, they would have seen there were no curbs, there were bioswales running up and down, and everything washes into those swales. So we made the best decision we could make at the time. Sort of the next lesson I learned, I went to a great talk in DC, and this is all hopefully relevant. And I heard a speaker, it was the first time I heard a speaker talk about sustainability. And he said there's really 4 forces that change society, and we tend to get them all backwards. The most important force is disaster. Nothing changes society faster than disaster. We were talking in the back end about stilts in houses. If you had overwash from the Atlantic over to the Indian River, that would end the debate about whether you should have stilt houses. It would. It would be a disaster and things would change. We had a huge fish kill in 2016 in the Indian River Lagoon. I like to say now, never let a good disaster go to waste. Now, think of all the power that came out of that disaster. Disasters are not our first choice, but they are the most powerful force we have for changing human behavior. Next powerful force, market forces. The market, capitalism, changes things really fast. We often forget to use that force while we change behaviors. If you could make it cheaper for an institution, they're going to do it. It just always works. Third is great leadership. It's not as common, it's not as powerful as disaster or market forces. And fourth, really low on the list, is education. It's really hard to educate people to change things. And so when we look down at sustainability things, you got to keep that in mind. We tend to start with this bottom one, and it's really hard. But I did go sort of on this course of how do I learn about behavior change. And I have a master's in public health. Why do I have a master's in public health? I'm a zoo guy. Any guesses? Yeah.
The liability of people who interact with media.
Wow, thank God that's not the answer. It's a wonderful guess, but that's not the answer.
Because people are animals, and animals are in the zoo.
Wow, I like how you guys think. You're very creative thinkers. Where do everything we know about behavior change comes from? Public health. Health behaviors. Where have we put more time and energy? How do you stop people from smoking? How do you talk people to exercise? How do you get them to eat healthy? We've been doing those things for years and years and years. So the best learnings for actual behavior change does come from public health. Last 20 years it's been coming into the environment. And one thought I had tonight actually is there's a great guy, Doug Mackenzie Moore, who goes around and teaches something. He teaches a workshop on how to change people's behavior in the community. But you actually change behaviors one behavior at a time. People hate, you don't just change it overnight. It's one behavior at a time. So for all the sustainability boards looking at, my gosh, it's one at a time. It actually is one at a time. And that's why I brought my bag up here to show you my one at a time. Right? Paper was easy. Next thing I started doing, this one's actually really cool because this is an old banner at the zoo that we repurpose as these bags, which are very cool. But how many of you use the bags when you go to Publix? Right? That is a low-hanging fruit. I am so religious, I will not buy groceries if I don't have my bag. It's that simple. Or I'll walk out like this, right? On the other hand, I'm just learning to say no to bags everywhere else. You know, I went to CVS because I didn't know there was dinner to get snacks, and luckily I caught the person. But how many times do you find you're walking out of plastic bags other places, right? Because you learn behaviors one behavior at a time. This is the world's most disgusting reusable cup because I'm not very good at cleaning it. But I do take it everywhere, and I do not go to a soda fountain without it. I just won't do it. I will not buy the drink. I will not buy bottled water if I can avoid it. I'm very religious about that. You guys in Salvage, you rock. You have glasses. Look at that. That is amazing. That is an amazing behavior. I brought this in. I was so wrong. I didn't need it, right? That's next on our list of low-hanging fruit, and I'll get to the zoo stuff in a minute. So action, sort of one at a time, brought us, to where we are. We look to change people's behaviors. The zoo actually started a conversation about sustainability a few years ago, and I will tell you, as much as I love to claim we're great at this, we're not. There are other zoos. You go to the zoos in the Northwest, they're like zero carbon use. Everything is recycled, repurposed. We're not we're not that great at it. We've gotten better lately, and I'll tell you why that's important. Because as we started going down this journey of what we could do together, that message actually came out from our operations director. Our operations director runs our restaurants, has started some other things I'll tell you about in a minute. But I was very frustrated because we kept talking like we were some leader. We are not a leader in this field. There are a lot greener people here. But she actually said something one day that turned the zoo's course. She said, Keith, we're not about leading from in front. We're about leading as a member of the pack. And that changed how the zoo thought about things. Changed how I thought about it. She said, if we're so perfect, how is anyone else going to like, oh, you're the zoo, right? But we're not. We stink. We have a lot of room to grow. But that's okay, because everyone else in the room stinks too. I mean, you guys, probably some of you are really, really good at this, but how many of you used a motor vehicle to get here tonight? Anyone didn't use a motor vehicle? All right, you guys rock. I want to be like you when I grow up. But everyone else, we drove here, right? It's hard to cut out those behaviors. So here's some things the zoo has started to do that said, hey, let us be a member of the pack. Let us do some examples of things we do well, and then we can move to things that we can all do together. Some of the stuff that we've done that are really expensive, but we hope will take on, is we did a waste-free event last year. We did Yazoo, which is about 1,700 people. We said, what does it take to actually mean a waste-free event? Waste-free event. The cans and the bottles were recycled. Everything else went into composting. Everything else went to composting. 50 restaurants, 1,700 people. Every fork, knife, glass was compostable. We had to find all this stuff. We had to make sure that it all could be composted. We had to work with 50 restaurants so they didn't bring anything that could get in that composting stream. Because if it did, it screws up the whole night. The composter can't use it. And here was the amazing thing we learned. Those restaurants were so into it. They were so excited about the possibility of not wasting stuff that they bought in. This one restaurant didn't get the message. They showed up with all these, 1,500 people, lots of servings, 1,000 servings of food in a plastic something, right? We had to go over and say, this could be disaster. The woman who ran the restaurant came over and said, this is my husband who dwarfed me. He is standing right here. He will physically not let a single person leave our station without giving us the plastic back so we can dispose of it, right? That's sort of being part of the pack, right? We could have yelled at her or got upset. She wanted to do it because people do want to do these behaviors. We've done some other things that are sort of fun and funky that we think use social pressure. We have a women's group called Women of the Wild. And what's interesting is that we tried all sorts of stuff. This is a lot of professional women who network, share a glass of wine. There's no committees, there's no responsibility, but we sort of work with them on environmental issues. We've done sea turtles, we've done pollinators, but what really stuck with things doing with their own behavior. And so one of the things is, how many of you are good at bringing the cup, right? How many of you are good at using reusable chopsticks when you go out for Asian food? Any of you do that? I'm terrible at this. This is another one I have to learn, right? But the bottom line is chopsticks are mainly made of bamboo. They affect some salamander species. This is not a bad behavior. Now we're starting to get there. Our kit includes all these things that you could have. We call it a restaurant survival kit. You keep it in your car, so when you go in to get dim sum and you forgot your reusable chopsticks, you can run out and get them because they're not at home, right? So we have reusable chopsticks, we have a reusable straw, we have a thing for doggy bag for food. It's just an idea. It's just an idea that models your behavior until you get the behavior. And it's cool. It was great holiday gifts. Everybody loved it. Not because we're great at it, we're just figuring it out. Next on the list, this straw thing, right? Not a good thing for sea turtles. So this is a big solution. If you need straws, that's a pretty good solution. We're working with a company in Aardvark that makes paper straws that are good for sea turtles. They taste delicious. They break down right away. But really, do we need straws at all? Right. And how much would a bar save if it didn't have to put straws in its drinks? It's a market force, right? So now we've just got to get the conversation going to bar owners. Hey, you can ask people if they want a straw. Like when I go and go to the supermarket and I bring my bag and then they try to put plastic around my meat, right? I sort of go, sort of defeats the point, doesn't it, right? So I try to explain really nicely, no, I'm really trying to cut down on plastic bags because I work at the zoo and we have all these sea turtles and they're all full of plastic. And people get it, they get it really fast. So we're doing a couple things at the zoo. Talked about the compostable events, not cheap, but we're gonna have to keep going now. We're having a question, can we make every event fully compostable? Biggest problem was finding the composter. We're trying to get him to move from the West Coast to the East Coast. So if anyone has 50 acres of land, where they'd like to set up a very nice composting facility, he's looking for land here. You got it? We'll talk. We now know how to do this. So if you want to put on a waste-free event, come talk to us. We'll walk you through the process. We know where to buy the products. The people who actually do the work at the zoo, I know, they gave me some stats. I'll tell you this, hold on. We actually replaced more than 76,000 plastic serviceware items. 76,000 items in one night would have been used at that event, which gives you an idea. Diverted over 2 tons of waste from the land through composting. We worked with this company, Bay Mulch, which is great, and we're willing to share. Talked about the survival kits. We have a composting center now on the zoo's grounds, thanks to Waste Management, who helped us with this project. It's up and running, so we're going to compost our own animal waste. We're working with Keep Brevard Beautiful on this idea of how do we actually work with the restaurants to make it in their economic interest, so that they want to get rid of the plastic. Because every time I always want to do a talk where I get to pull stuff out of bags. Every time I pull this out, they don't have to give me a foam clamshell, which is terrible for turtles, or a plastic one, which is more expensive. It's saving them money. It's saving them money. So if we could get everybody to do this instead, it's going to work on those restaurants. And finally, do I have any other great thoughts here on the list that I was given, which is much better than I would have done. And finally, we're also looking at some things that will really cost the zoo money, but are just the right things to do. We make about $80,000 a year selling water bottles. It's a lot of income to give up. We have put in, because we actually got a grant from Rockwell Collins, we have water bottle refilling stations now at the zoo. It's sort of baby steps. What will happen sometime in the next 2 years is we will stop selling water bottles. We sell all sorts of reusable cups. There'll be advantages. If you want water at the zoo, we have water fountains. Buy a cup, and we'll work with you. But it'll be a big leap of faith. It will cost us money. Someone said earlier that they don't like taxes. You know, I feel like the lagoon tax was a case of us being adults and responsible adults and saying, hey, we messed up the lagoon, we gotta fix it, and we're gonna have to probably pay for this forever. That's just what responsible people do. And that's the feeling we have about water at the zoo. It's just responsible for us to take that out of people's hands. I think that's my story. We are so pumped for this now. I'll tell you this. In coming here tonight and seeing all of you, I love Brevard County. This is a group of people, Brevard County, who feel like they can change their community. And that is not true everywhere. So I pulled in, couldn't find a parking spot, thought, isn't this awesome? This thing is so crowded. So thank you for all your support.
Trade the mic up to Chris and you, Dave. Thanks for pointing out the glasses. Yeah, that's a nice step. In the composting of materials at events, can you speak real quickly about composting as in the classic sense of, yeah, a big pile of organic materials and I added to that versus industrial composting? And was it mostly industrial composting?
So what happened is we had 60 bins. The company brought 60 bins to the zoo. They're set up all over the zoo. And again, it was a single stream. Everything you ate, every cup, every glass, every straw, was all made of compostable stuff, which you can't recycle, by the way. So once your cups are done, don't use them the next day for recycling because it's going to mess up the recycling system. It's made of sugarcane and some other stuff. It all went into the bins. The guy picked up the bins, took it to his compost facility. It turns into fertilizer for farms. Does that answer your question?
That's it, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's for farm-based, it's for agriculture-based, so. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, next up we have Chris Castro. And I met Chris over at the Sustainability Symposium in Orlando. He also presented over there. And he is the Sustainability Director for the City of Orlando.
Thank you much.
So, honored to be here tonight. While I bring up my presentation, I'd like everyone to maybe stand up real quick, right? Get the platform, and we're all about spreading the good word. Take a selfie with your neighbor or a group of people, post it up on social media, let them know what's happening in Satellite Beach right now. I'm not joking. Take a selfie with your neighbor, post it up. Hashtag Satellite Beach Sustainability. Make it happen.
How long have you worked there?
Yes, thank you. All right, I'm gonna get started here. Thank you for indulging me in that. Hopefully you are currently posting that up on social media. I think it's critically important for those who follow me, online, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it might be, you realize that daily I'm posting about the work that we're doing, because it's so important to get the message out and to show the community that these things are happening, because it builds that culture. It builds the culture of people who want to support what we're trying to do. Once again, I want to express my gratitude to Nick, to Courtney, the mayor, to everybody who came out tonight, and especially for the invitation. I'm extremely impressed at what Brevard County and the local governments in Brevard County are doing to come together, to work together, mobilize our communities, and move in the right direction for humanity and for the species we share this planet with. And so you all should be incredibly proud of that. Most people don't know the breadth of experience that I've had, and in a kind of a short window, I've been working in sustainability and consulting for governments and corporations and nonprofits and civil society for over 12 years. My current role is the Director of Sustainability in the City of Orlando. I work in Mayor Dyer's office. I'm the Senior Advisor for him on all things climate, sustainability, energy, you name it. And before I got to this role 4 years ago, my passion for sustainability was really built off of a big reason, actually, is Satellite Beach. I'm a second generation Cuban American. I'm originally from Miami, Florida. And when I was trying to decide where I wanted to go to college, I realized that one of my biggest passions was surfing. My parents would bring me up here when I was 8 years old every single year. We'd come to Satellite Beach, and Cocoa Beach, and Patrick's Air Force Base, and we'd surf these breaks up and down Central Florida. And a bunch of my buddies got into UCF. I got into UCF. I got a free ride, and I said, you know what, I might as well go there, completely undeclared. Didn't know what I was going to do as a major. I just knew I was an hour from the coast of the best beach in the state, right, of the state of Florida, and I was sold. And so thank you to Satellite Beach for bringing me to Central Florida and allowing me to do that. So over the course of the last 12 years, each one of these organizations I've either started or I'm currently on the board of. I'm extremely active in not just government, but trying to mobilize nonprofits and civil society to move the agenda, whether it's in around solar, and I'm sure you're familiar with the solar co-ops, Solar United Neighbors. I sit on the board of that, right? A lot of the academic institutions, UCF, Florida Poly, Valencia College. I'm part of the Florida Solar Energy Center's board, so I really work on that at a statewide level. And I've founded a number of these that you may have heard of. One, Ideas for Us, Fleet Farming, The Hive, and I want to dive into a little bit of this presentation. Throughout it, you're going to hear three kind of themes that I feel are critically important as Satellite Beach is building this culture of sustainability, or not just Satellite Beach, sorry, Brevard County local governments. We're building this culture, community engagement, collective leadership, partnerships, and coalitions. This is how Orlando has positioned itself to be the leading city in sustainability in the entire Southeast United States. And so keep that in mind throughout this presentation. I mentioned I was undeclared at UCF. In 2006, my freshman year, I ended up meeting a professor, Dr. Penelope Canaan, still a mentor of mine. I consider her my grandmother. And she inspired me so much that I decided to begin mobilizing students on campus to do something about climate change and sustainability. And we ended up passing a student referendum to get UCF to commit to the American College and University's President's Climate Commitment. It's a big mouthful. We call it ACCIPUC for short. I'm sure Ken is well familiar. Our goal was to become carbon neutral by 2050, the second largest university in the entire country to become carbon neutral, fully sustainable campus by 2050. Of course, we didn't know how to get there. So President Hitt said, Chris, I need you to mobilize a student task force, and we built a sustainability and climate action plan that's still enacted today. And one of the things I felt was missing in that was mobilizing students. The work that Ken is doing to get students at FIT to work together on advancing sustainability is brilliant. And it's the way that we did it at UCF. So I started an organization called Ideas for Us. The whole effort was to bring an interdisciplinary group of students together to work on advancing those types of sustainability initiatives. Bring a bike share program on campus, start tailgate recycling, bring solar arrays, start a campus garden, do energy competitions in dorms, etc., etc. Well, today, Ideas for Us has grown to more than 25 different countries around the world. We have operations in 200 different communities and essentially have become an international network of young people and old people working together to advance sustainability for humanity. And the three things, I think that there are three things that hopefully could replicate here to Brevard County. One is really important. I know a couple of us in the audience have been there, Danielle and Zach and team, is the Hive. And of course, Amy, the Hive is essentially a think tank for sustainability. And this has been really important to build the culture and community engagement around what we're trying to do from the city's perspective. Every single month, in fact, yesterday, we celebrated our 5-year anniversary. 60 months in a row, we have not missed a beat, even before Hurricane Irma. We decided not to postpone the Hive. We actually did the Hive 4 days before it came. And I'll tell you, every single month, we have over 100 different people who come out to share knowledge about different sustainability challenges in the community and using human-centered design to essentially create solutions that can be implemented. So I want to show you just a quick little visual on what that actually looks like if this decides to play. And if it's not, we're moving forward. You can look it up online, it's really cool. There's a lot of So the Hive is really important, and I think, and I've been talking with others here in the room, and I think that the Hive could be a really great strategy for not just Satellite Beach, but every single city within Brevard County to implement. Maybe it's not monthly, maybe it's every other month, depending on the frequency of organizers. This is a fully voluntary organization and community event that we host. And we have the tools and the toolkits, and we're happy to share it with every single one of you. The second is seed funding, what I call micro grants for the community to get them inspired. Once they come up with the idea through the Hive, now let's get a little bit of money and implement. And we've worked on launching what's called the Solutions Fund through Ideas for Us. One of the cool events that we've hosted is called Orlando Soup. We've modeled it off of what's called Detroit Soup that happened first in Detroit. And now we've taken this concept of a micro-granting dinner, and we've actually spread it all around the world. The concept is everybody who comes out to a dinner pays $12 to have that dinner, and you have 5 projects that essentially are presented. Every single person gets a vote at the end of the night. The one with the most votes gets the money, 100% what was raised by the ticket sales. So it's literally like a Kickstarter, but the day of. No needing to wait a month, We literally all come together, we have a meal together, we hear different pitches which normally come from the hive, right? The whole thing about incubating these ideas. They build those ideas over a month. Every quarter we host a soup. And that soup people present, and we've funded project after project after project, which has helped us to really build that momentum. In addition to this, just that, Ideas also provides micro grants on a quarterly basis around the network, around the world. So if you have an idea and want to get it funded, you can apply, ideasforus.org, you can go and apply. This is essentially a graphic of the essentially 6 different projects that were funded in December. Everything from rural electrification in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, over 10,000 trees planted throughout Togo, school farms in Uganda, the list goes on. Those are some international projects, but we do things also right in our backyard. And fleet farming, you might have heard of this movement that started out of Orlando that was birthed essentially from the Hive. The community crowdsourced ideas. That's the beauty about the Hive, is we crowdsource people's ideas from different ages, interdisciplinary, intergenerational. And the idea was, how can we feasibly grow and meet our own food demands in a city that's continually urbanizing, and that property values are extremely high. So of course, I'd rather build a building than put a farm on it. So the idea was, how do we take underutilized land and primarily homeowner lawns and convert them to in-ground organic farms? There's over 40 million acres of lawns in this country. They use an absorbent amount of water, fertilizer, that cause problems in our lagoons and in our streams and in our lakes. The whole point is, let's completely turn that on its head. And I'll talk about some enabling policy that allowed us to do this in the city of Orlando. This is, I also had a little short video here, probably not going to play, but that's okay. Fleet farming started 4 years ago. We celebrated our 4-year anniversary this month. We are now in 5 different cities, including Jacksonville, Orlando, Oakland, California, and Miami, and in Uganda. We have 1,000 communities signed up to scale fleet farming in all around the world, and now have packaged an entire toolkit on how to take this social enterprise and bring it to your community. How do you actually create a financially sustainable and environmentally sustainable business model off of farming people's lawns and bringing that food to market, and essentially share crop with the homeowner. People who give you the land for free, we essentially give them produce for free every single day. And we take the excess and sell it to markets. That revenue comes back in and creates this sustainable business model, essentially. So that's a little bit about fleet farming. I wanted to bring that history up, because I think a lot of the community engagement is the reason why Orlando is blossoming as a city in relation to sustainability. This room is a prime example of advocates who care. A group of small but mighty group of people who are trying to change the world, right? Like Margaret Mead said, it's really the only thing that ever has. And so cities, including Satellite Beach, small, large, medium, are transforming as we know it. As a municipal government official, I'll tell you that traditional government operations of filling potholes and picking up trash isn't the only thing that we're worried about these days. Our houses are now power plants. Our parking lots are now filling stations, right? Our street lights are actually beacons for sensors and other different types of things. Things are evolving very, very quickly. What you might not know about Orlando is that we're not as big as most people think. The city proper is 277,000 people. Metro Orlando is 2.5 million. We have 68 million visitors to Orlando, though, every single year. So we have enough people in Orlando that basically makes up the population of Atlanta every given day, based on tourism and our own individuals, right? And Orlando is the fastest growing MSA in the country out of the top 30. So when you look at it, there's actually, for every 1 resident, 245 tourists at any given time in the city of Orlando. Talk about a challenge. Talk about a sustainability challenge. These people are coming to our city, they're using our water, they're using our energy, they're producing a lot of waste, and then they get to go back home. And we are left essentially with the problem. So our challenge in sustainability isn't just our municipal operations, it's how do we ensure the long-term economic viability, environmental sustainability, social benefit of our city in perpetuity. And that's kind of what my role, that is what I do every single day for the city of Orlando. Now, governments are beginning to question what the future of our cities will look like 5, 10, 15 years from now. And this is a prime example, right? I never grew up with a rotary phone, I'll tell you, right? But I will tell you that this transformation is only 10 years old. The cell phone in our pockets are a decade old. And it's a prime example, an analogy to this. Easter morning, 1900, 5th Avenue, New York City, and it says, "Spot the automobile." There's one Model T and over 10,000 horse and buggies down New York City. And the study was that if we continued on this path, we would have manure packed 2 stories high by 1950. 13 years later, Easter morning, 5th Avenue, New York City, spot the horse. Not a single horse can be found. The technological revolution of the automobile completely transformed cities as we know it. It's why Orlando has sprawled so much versus building around a central public transit system. Cities beyond the 1900s essentially started to grow really inefficiently from a planning perspective, no offense planners. But it's very true. So knowing that 10 years ago, Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, you may have heard of him, longest standing mayor in the entire country right now, believe it or not. We have no term limits, so that's probably a good thing. His vision was that as Orlando becomes a globally competitive powerhouse in the 21st century, that we become the most environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, technology-enabled, and economically vibrant city in the Southeast, one of the most sustainable cities in the country. This is why I work in local government. I get that a lot. You started a company, you have 10 other nonprofits, why are you working in the city of Orlando? It's because you have leadership, collective leadership, that essentially gets it and wants to move forward very quickly, right? So that's where Greenworks Orlando comes into play. Today, Ken's presentation about what you all have done in Satellite Beach to build your sustainability plan, what the core factors are, was quite interesting. And we see it a little bit differently, but as was mentioned, not every community is the same, and in fact, every community may have to come back to the drawing board and figure out what are their own challenges and their own opportunities. For us, we looked at this kind of holistically when we were looking at energy and green buildings, transportation and mobility, water resources, local food systems, solid waste, livability, and the green economy. How does all of that drive economic growth, job creation, and opportunity for the people who live, work, learn, and play in our city? Because if you don't have opportunities, guess what? They're going to go to another city, right? But there's an ability to drive a clean economy, not the current economy that we have. There's an amazing TED Talk and an amazing book called The Clean Disruption by Tony Seba. Look up Tony Seba. This guy's brilliant. He has a book that's out and basically talks about this revolution of the clean disruption. That's where we're moving towards. The other interesting thing that I've been really looking at are the Sustainable Development Goals. Who here, with a raise of their hands, has heard of the SDGs? Not many. The Sustainable Development Goals is an international framework that was adopted by more than 193 countries in the world in September of 2015. They're less than 3 years old. And you might have heard of the Millennium Development Goals that were adopted in 2000 and were 15 years in the making, essentially, and they were focused on developing countries. The Sustainable Development Goals include now developed and developing countries and are the international framework for how to move our future that eradicates poverty, that eradicates economic and social inequalities, and combats the threats to the environment and climate change. Those are the objectives of the SDGs. But it's a lot more broad than even Greenworks' plan. It's talking about quality education, gender equality. It's talking about affordable clean energy, of course, and climate action, but also peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships for the goals. These are the international framework that now cities are beginning to tie their efforts to identify how am I helping to move the needle on this international effort. Orlando is one of 5 cities in the country, including New York, LA, San Diego, and Baltimore, that are essentially now taking our sustainability plans and we're literally aligning the current goals, targets, and indicators of the SDGs to our strategies. What is Orlando doing to advance the international sustainability of this planet? Right? Could be something to look into as you're developing these plans. I'm going to dive in. It's going to be a fire hose of information. It probably already has been. I'm going to dive into some of these key strategies to give you a taste of what we're working on. Energy and green buildings. This graphic is produced by Lawrence Livermore National Lab, one of the Department of Energy National Labs, produced every 2 years. This is the most recent one in 2015. What it shows you is supply and demand of all of the energy sources in the entire country every 2 years. It shows you everything from solar to nuclear, down to coal, natural gas, petroleum, and everything in between. And it's called a spaghetti chart. And it basically breaks out into the actual quads. It's actually broken out into quads, the actual quads of energy to the demand that we have, which are the 4 sectors of demand: residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation. Those are the sectors that we consume energy from, right? The most daunting part of this whole graphic is that the majority of the energy we're consuming across this system is going to waste. In fact, about 2/3 of the energy that we're consuming to produce economic value is lost to inefficiency. And even more importantly, electricity generation, this world's trend. There are major trends in the world. One of the major trends is electrification. We're electrifying our heating systems, we're electrifying our vehicles, we're electrifying a lot of the processes we were using gas for in the previous couple of centuries, right? Well, electrification, when you look at the production of electricity, it's actually 86% inefficient in the system. This is a 10-year study that was performed by the American Council for Energy Efficient Economies, or ACEEE, and essentially they looked at 10 years in the electric grid. They looked at power generation, they looked at transmission and distribution of that power, and then they looked at the end user, the buildings that are consuming that power, right? And what they found is, in every part of that segment, there's a significant amount of waste, and when you add it all up, it's actually 86% of all of it. So you take 100 tons, put it into the furnace, of coal, let's say, 86 tons is literally lost to heat, to vibrations, to inefficiencies. 14 tons goes to powering this light, this projector, heating and cooling our homes, driving industry and manufacturing. There's a big inefficiency problem. So my question as the Director of Sustainability was, well, what is Orlando doing to solve that problem? And what are the other cities doing as well? And just so happens that ACEEE has a city scorecard of the top 50 MSAs in the country. And they rank you based on how efficient you are for transportation, for utilities, for your community engagement, for your municipality. And in 2015, we came in at 30th in the country out of the top 50. We were the second best in the Southeast after Atlanta. Atlanta was 15. Remember these numbers. There's a quiz. And what I saw was Boston was number 1. New York, number 2, Washington, 3, Seattle, 5, Portland, 8. I was like, okay, I've heard of these cities. You know, what are they doing that I'm not? And how do I implement that so that we can drive Orlando's leadership in this space? And there was a wheel. I didn't put it in this presentation, but I basically found 12 policies and programs that we can implement as municipal governments to drive and market transformation in energy efficiency, specifically in the built environment. And like we've talked about tonight, leadership by example by municipal governments is step 1. So we did a couple of things we've been doing a couple of things to drive efficiency for municipal operations. First and foremost, we set a goal that every building that we own becomes a high-performance green building, certification, LEED to the side, high-performance green building by 2040. Current buildings that we own. We also made a requirement that every building that we build from 2010 on has to be LEED Silver minimum. And in fact, since then, we've built nothing but LEED Gold. We actually have certified over 15 LEED Gold buildings, including the recent Orlando Police Headquarters, the Amway Arena, where Orlando Magic plays, the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center, which I hope you have visited thus far, and if you haven't, go to it, it's LEED certified. We also have 7 fire stations that are LEED certified, 3 more in the hopper that will be gold. You get the picture. We are very strict on ensuring that what we realized was it makes no sense for us to cut corners as a government. If I'm going to own this building for 50 years, right? If I spend marginally 5% more to build this thing LEED, right? And we're going to save 40% over the lifetime of this building, it makes no sense to cut corners. That's nonsense thinking. That is short-term economic gain type thinking, which is not the way that we become a sustainable city, right? So we said that's a requirement, and we'll find the way to fund it. Don't worry, we're going to make sure that it's high performance. Lastly, really important, how are we going to go back to those buildings that are existing and make them energy efficient? And we took a big leap. Some cities, most cities, don't have the risk profile to take out a municipal bond to do what we did. But Orlando decided to own our own destiny as it relates to energy efficiency, and we passed a $17.5 million bond in 2015, a year into my position. The whole point was to basically build an internal energy company in the city. We built an internal ESCO, energy service company, right? And the ESCO was, normally, Johnson Controls, Siemens, Honeywell, a number of these large companies you've heard of will come to a municipality and they'll say, hey, I'll bring the money, I'll invest in your building, and we'll split savings over a term. But the term happens to be maybe 2, sometimes longer than twice as long as the ROI of the investment. So of course, there's tons of cash flow that's in that whole entire economic equation. And for some cities, and maybe some of the cities in the room, that will work. For us, we realized, well, our bond capital is at a better rate than any of these companies can get. Why don't we control the funding? Why don't we hire internal energy experts and we'll control the investment, take the savings, take half of it and pay the debt over 15 years, take the other half and create a recycling energy fund. It's called the Revolving Energy Fund. Now we have a perpetual fund for future improvements to other buildings. So we targeted the worst buildings, 55 of our 125 occupied buildings, and now we're saving $2.4 million per year in avoided energy cost taxpayer monies that we're no longer using, half of which is paying the bond, the other half is recycling in a fund. And that helps unlock other resources for us. That's critical. Energy efficiency is critical. All of this is done by a really sophisticated tool to measure and verify. That's really important to know. The other interesting movement, thinks that picture isn't there. Imagine downtown skyline of a bunch of buildings. Those are each buildings, okay? Downtown Orlando skyline, bunch of buildings. This policy took 2.5 years of my life. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And essentially, it is the #1 driver for energy efficient. It's what Boston, Washington, D.C., Portland, Seattle, all of the top 10, in fact, had done this. And it became the #1 reason why they created a driver. Essentially, when you go to buy a car, we all know there's an MPG on that car. When you go to buy a computer, we now have an energy gauge, very similar to that, or a water heater, or any kind of device. You can make an informed judgment on how efficient one product is over the other. When you would go to buy today an apartment in downtown Orlando, or rent an office space for your business, you don't get the information about the utilities, and utilities are the second highest cost to live or work in any building. So, the point is that we need to create a free market of information. And this policy, I know that sometimes it's difficult to force things, but sometimes you have to. We require now that every building above 50,000 square feet has to step on the scale and go through a building benchmark. It's an energy benchmark. Gives you a 1 to 100 score of how efficient your building is and it uses energy and water. 50 is the national average, 75 or above is an Energy Star. You've probably heard of Energy Star before. Energy Star created the certification. It's free of charge, by the way. All you have to do is create an account online, you plug in your information, and guess what? Boom, you get your score. So now the city is requiring that every building goes through that process and makes it publicly transparent. So when I go to buy an apartment now, I now can make a judgment between apartment A that's $1,000 a month, but $300 in utility bills, or apartment B that's $1,200 a month, but only $7,500 or $75 in utility bills, and it's cheaper for me to choose B from a total cost of ownership, right? Think about that. So that creates a driver. If I'm a building that's a 20 and you're a building that's a 60, my question is, how do I drive net operating incomes in my building by reducing expenses? That drives efficiency. Well, I need to retrofit my lights to LED, I need to put building controls, I need to, my HVAC renovations, etc., right? This is huge, $208 million in projected savings between now and 2030. $64 million in healthcare benefits, nearly 560 jobs, full-time, high wage, just by making information transparent to the market. PACE was mentioned, and I see Ricardo here representing Wygreen. Property assessed clean energy is critical. If your city has not already adopted it, I think Satellite Beach has, very excited to see it. This is one of the drivers for a clean energy economy. Because the question becomes, I'm not a city, so I can't take out a municipal bond to make all my buildings efficient. So if I'm a private building owner, it's rare for me to get into my coffers, my own coffers, to invest in my building. Even though you're going to save money, it's still, what PACE allows you to do is tap into funding that's outside of your balance sheet and repay it through the property taxes over an extended term. You essentially take out a special assessment for your building, right? And your building takes out a loan. Think of it that way. Your property takes out the assessment, not you as an individual. It can transfer upon transaction. You can stretch it out super long. This has driven, last year we did 1.4 million in PACE assessments in Orlando, over 100 projects in just Orlando. In just about 8 months, we really launched it in March of last year. The important thing, and no offense to Wygreen, the important thing is that you need to create an open marketplace for PACE. Adopting one PACE company, no matter how good they are, isn't the best thing for your community. You want choice. You want multiple banks out there. So Wygreen did the vast majority, I will say, of these assessments. But Renew Financial did a lot, Renovate America did a lot, and so did Florida PACE Funding Agency. There are 4 banks that offer $500 million of capital that's available in Orlando to do this, both residential and commercial. So PACE is a critical tool. SELF is a critical tool. I hope you have heard of SELF, the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. Amazing work that's happening. Doug Howard and his whole team, they launched a CDFI, a Community Development Finance Institution, where they get low interest loans from banks. They mark it up a small amount, they give you low interest loans to low income individuals, and they can make property improvements, pay it back as a loan. We basically have done about $750,000 per year since we launched this in Orlando. So not a huge amount, but it's helping specific communities who don't have the means or may have a bad credit score because of their health problem or whatever it might be, and now they're able to get a loan that's actually favorable, 5 to 6% interest instead of 14% that Bank of America wanted to give them, right? So that's the demand side of things. Now the question becomes, how do we move the supply side? And it's a lot more cost effective to make your building more efficient and then add solar than it is just to add solar, right? And you waste 30% of it, right? So that's the mentality. I think all of us should take that away. Like was mentioned earlier, a lot of cities have started to endorse 100% renewable energy goals. Orlando was one of those. And in addition to just signing the mayor's commitment, we brought an actual ordinance to council that was passed in August 8th of last year that committed us to 100% renewables by 2050 citywide and 100% renewables for municipal operations by 2030 for all of everything from wastewater treatment plants to the Amway Arena, all of our fire stations, etc. This was the image of the supporters who came out. And on a regular basis, anytime I bring a policy, we have between 30, 50, sometimes 100 people who come out and support this type of stuff. It's about that community engagement on the first hand, right? There's a lot of things that cities can do now to improve the economics of solar. One of those is looking at how to improve the soft costs of solar. 50% of going solar is actually not the hardware. It's not the solar panels or the inverter or the balance of systems. It's actually profit margin for the company, financing, customer acquisition, marketing, permitting, inspection, that whole side of the equation. And we control that as cities. So there's an effort called SolSmart, which I encourage you all to look into, and it's a ranking system bronze, silver, and gold on how solar friendly your city is. Free of charge, very easy to go through, but it identifies gaps in your planning, in your land development code, in your inspection, that allows you to improve. And in fact, one of the things we're working on now is waiving solar permit fees for small scale solar. So if you're a residential system that's 15 kilowatts or below, our goal is to drive solar. What we're going to try to do is eliminate the actual fee to get the permit to do so. It's a small step, but it's something that encourages the market. We have started to look at a lot of our rooftops, like I know City Hall is looking at, which is amazing. This is a 420 kilowatt system that essentially powers almost 100% of this whole entire fleet and facilities complex. We are in the process of essentially identifying a lot more. Solar United Neighbors started in Orlando, has now scaled to 20 different co-ops across the state. We installed 6.7 megawatts as of this past Monday across the state in a year and a half. That has made Florida one of the most ripe markets for solar in the entire country, and we are the worst for state policy as it relates to renewable energy. Almost the worst. Alabama might just beat us as being the worst. Like, they're almost there. No third-party PPAs, no RPS, we don't have a rec market, we have low cost of utilities, we tax leased equipment. I mean, I can go on and on about how bad we are. Point is that people got together and said, you know what, we still want to go solar. What about bulk purchasing solar by coming together and lowering that total cost? Makes a lot of sense. Go to Costco versus the other one, right? You kind of get the idea. Do that with solar. Now the average price is $2 per watt installed across the state. That's one of the lowest installed costs nationwide, right? Versus a $320 to $350 if you go yourself. So now you're cutting more than a third off the cost just by pooling together. Brilliant model. Orlando, and I was talking about this earlier, has a municipal utility. And most people are like, man, you're so lucky, municipal utilities, like, that's so awesome. And it's great that we have municipal utilities, don't get me wrong. But they're also very difficult to work with. So don't think that because you have FPL here, it's impossible. I'll tell you, munis sometimes are even more hard-headed. So what I can tell you is we've made some significant progress the last 3 years with OUC. Changes in literally mindset that I've almost seen, like paradigm shift changes. It's amazing. And we've looked at 2 programs that have really helped expedite it. One is called Community Solar. And very similar to Community Gardens, and I hope that plays, it doesn't. Basically, we have launched a large-scale solar farm on top of an old coal ash landfill. We took an old landfill where we were putting coal ash, we put solar on top of it, and now are allowing people at their house who may not have rooftops that are suitable for solar to tap into a community array and take shares of that community array. Think of it like a community garden, right? You have a large plot of land and a bunch of small plots, and homeowners take one of those plots. Well, this is a large solar array, and homeowners can take, you take 10. She'll take 20. This business over here might take 100 panels, right? And collectively, we all own that solar array. It's called community solar. That model has essentially democratized renewable energy. And it has made it easier for a business to go 100% renewables because I may not have to make the initial investment, I just have to pay the rate for solar, which is really less than 10% more than the regular rate at this point in time, and dropping. So community solar is important. I brokered a deal in December that's pretty historic in Orlando, where we are now taking 5.2 megawatts of solar energy from the solar farm and essentially offsetting the municipal operations, moving towards that 2030 100% goal. What that did was abate almost 6 million pounds of coal from being burned every single year and 12 million pounds of CO2 from being released into the atmosphere, just for 5.2 megawatts. I'll tell you, it's a very small single-digit percentage of the overall city, 5.2 megawatts. And that's how much impact it had. It powers all of City Hall, all 17 fire stations, and the Orlando Police Headquarters with that amount of power. It's a significant amount, and it's a big move for us. And because of this 100% commitment, all of a sudden, 6 months later, OUC changes their mind and now has committed to 120 megawatts of solar between now and 2020. This will move us significantly. They were they're thinking 30 megawatts in the next 2 years. They just completely, I mean, they orders of magnitude more. Now we're at 120. That would be 22,000 households in Orlando that could get power from the sun. And we would be a total of 7% for the total fuel mix in 2020 from just solar. That doesn't include other clean energy sources that we have. So it's about putting the pressure as local governments on the utilities, unis or IOUs, to show them the commitment from the community, because that sends market signals. It was mentioned that the market is one of the only things that will change behaviors. Absolutely right. That's a market signal. We're moving in that direction. You better help us move. I'm going to skip through this real quick because, and this was a cool video of us doing, oh, it's working. So we're starting to also test, believe it or not, floating solar, what we call photovoltaics, on top of man-made retention pond systems, not spring-fed natural lakes. I want to make that delineation. Only man-made retention ponds that are stormwater, basically cesspools for sediment and runoff. And now we are essentially trying to electrify them. And we're doing research on the biology impacts. We're doing research with UCF to figure out what actual impacts it can have on the solar production. In fact, we've seen some increase of that over time. All of that to say in the energy field that in 2017, IREE scored us last summer. And Orlando was one of the most energy improved cities in the entire country in 2 years. We went from 30th to 20th. We're now blue. We're now blue on the map, which is huge. For me, that was a marker, and Mayor was like, "Oh shit, Christopher, right?" And I'm like, "I told you, dude." So, see, Mayor. Hopefully, Mayor's around here. So that was, yeah, so essentially, listen to your technical staff because they really know what's happening. That was the moral of that story. I'm gonna quickly run through some of these other things. So food systems we're excited about. We mapped out the food deserts in Orlando. We realized there's a lot of pockets where people live more than 2 miles from a grocery store where they can get access to fresh produce. They're getting dinner at the convenience store down the street. Their kids think, carrots are coming from a can. It's ridiculous. And I've had conversations with these families. So of course, community gardens were brought up. Brilliant model. In fact, I was talking with Zach about that network he talked about. We have built 16 community gardens in the city proper alone, and those are just the ones that the city have built. Churches, schools have also built many, many more. And these gardens now work together in a network. Every 2 months we meet as the Community Garden Leadership Committee. We all share seeds, we share best practices, we bring expert speakers from University of Florida IFAS and other farmers in the region to come, and it's a really critical thing. It's very easy to build community gardens. The hard part is the ongoing participation in the community, the maintenance of the garden. It's not hard to build a community garden. We can do that in 4 hours, find a plot of land, we'll find the money, don't worry. Getting the community to take ownership is the hardest thing. So here's a cool example of one of the food desert ones. We picked a community center where we have tennis courts and stuff. We took a wasted space, which was literally, there's a fence and another fence. We were like, what is this doing? Nothing. Let's put a garden there. We put it there, and it was an amazing, amazing thing. I mentioned fleet farming earlier, and fleet really came out of a landscape code amendment that enabled edible landscapes on our lawns in Orlando. Most cities don't have a policy for or against edible landscapes. They're usually gray areas until a homeowner starts to complain about another neighbor, and then it bubbles up to us, right? Then it bubbles up to us, and then we're like, okay, well, what should we do here? Let's have a community meeting, and let's talk about it, and then it evolves, right? Our evolution was, let's just change the landscape code and allow 60% of your front lawn to be in-ground farm, raised bed, fruit trees, permaculture, some type of edible landscape, 100% of your side yard, 100% of your backyard. Who is us as a city to tell you what you can do on your property, especially if it's trying to be more self-sufficient and sustainable and grow your own food. There's actually a ridiculous lawsuit right now down from Miami Shores. I don't know if you saw that, where literally the city made it illegal to do this, and now it's in federal courts, and it's a nightmare. They're trying to preempt cities from allowing front-yard farming, and of course, that's probably not going to go anywhere. But I will say that's a big reason, and this was the battle. It went all the way to the New York Times. A little homeowner in Orlando, the story went all the way national to New York Times about neighbors competing, and this edible landscape in some of these houses, and it got that high to the point where the commissioners were like, listen, we're just gonna do the right thing, right? Sometimes you just gotta do the right thing. The other cool thing is we received a grant by the USDA this past year to target a food desert and comprehensively solve it. First thing is, this is a fleet farming plot in somebody's front yard. There's your driveway, right? So we have now moved fleet into a notorious food desert known as Paramore. It's West Orlando, essentially. If you're down I-4 and you see buildings on, downtown buildings on one side, on the east, the west side is a very blighted neighborhood known as Paramore. Food desert, notorious. It's actually a promise zone for the federal government because there's so many health issues as well. So we now are targeting that, and we've launched Fleet. This is one of the plots there in West Orlando. We've also started a new farmers market. There's 6 farmers markets in Orlando now. This one is in partnership with the Orlando City Soccer Stadium. So we have a new MLS team, very excited about. Now outside of the stadium, we have a farmers market every Saturday morning, and it's SNAP eligible, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Not only is it SNAP eligible, we got Fresh Access Bucks certified, meaning somebody can have a 2-for-1 SNAP dollar there. If you have 20 bucks a week, you can make $40 at this market alone. So we're trying to really enable people to come out and use that as their grocery store on a weekly basis, and then ongoing cooking and nutrition classes. Get these families to get what's being grown in their lawn and sold at this market and turn it into a healthy, delicious meal that they want to go back and eat again and change their mind up. We're even talking with Florida Hospital and Orlando Health about a veggie prescription program, what they call Veggie RX, and essentially prescribe people with diabetes, hypertension, other types of diet illnesses, diet disorders, and have them go to the market and actually prescribe certain veggies that we're selling as a means of medication and track that progress over time based on diet, right? Brilliant model, and we're basically working now. Both hospitals are on board. Little by little, we're going to start to roll this thing out. That's food. Transportation is key. Orlando's biggest sustainability problem, transportation. We're the #1 car rental market in the entire world. 169,000 rental cars. And our transit system sucks. Okay, I'm the first to say it. It's one of the worst. One thing we are proud of is we were one of the first cities to enable a bus rapid transit system, a BRT, in our downtown. It's a protected lane where you have a bus that goes very, very quickly instead of being in traffic. We have worked on over 50 miles now of sidewalks and bike paths. These are urban trails throughout neighborhoods. We have enabled a bike share program called Juice right now, and we're actually looking at a couple others. We launched Sunrail 3 years ago, a commuter train 60 miles up and down the I-4 corridor, get people off of I-4. If you're coming from Sanford to downtown, why are you driving? Just get on the Sunrail, it's cheaper. And the Bright Line, you probably heard of the Bright Line from Miami to Orlando, the high-speed rail. Well, that comes to Orlando in 2019, and it will intersect at the airport in the new South Terminal. So we're trying to look at alternative transportation modes. The other thing I heard about is fuel switching for municipal fleets, super important, and electric vehicle charging stations. Orlando, back in the Recovery Act, took a lot of our dollars and we put them into public charging stations. We now have 350 public chargers in the greater Orlando MSA, over 100 in the actual city proper. These are in parking garages, public, in parks, public right-of-ways. We've actually convinced, this is the hardest part, we convinced the Orlando Police Department to start going electric. The police are some of the most difficult nuts to crack as it relates to electric vehicles.
Solar power charging station.
Solar power, we have probably 2 handfuls of solar chargers, actually. So most of them aren't solar powered, but as we get more solar onto OEC's grid, they all become solar, right? So little by little. This is a picture of electric motorcycles. The city of Orlando, I brought down a dog and pony show and I said, hey, come down, I can bring the chief of police, Chief Mina, and I want you to ride this thing. He's like, Chris, this electric bikes, come on, man, like, you're wasting my time. I'm like, listen, just get on this thing, ride around the block. He came back from his ride, he says, I want 10 by the end of the year. He literally said that. He's like, this is unbelievable. 0 emission, highest performance he's ever ridden on a bike. and it's quiet. People are literally sneaking up on I'm not kidding. So for races, we do 110 races every year, and we put exhaust into the runners. It's so counterintuitive. It's like, why are we fogging people out with exhaust? Get an electric bike. For special events, for protests, you got it, right? We're also looking at taking that limo, BRT, and moving it to an all-electric bus. I've tested 3 manufacturers. I've brought them down to Orlando. This is us with Mayor and our Commissioner, our Head of Links, Ed Johnson, a number of other, Transportation Director, Billy Hadaway, and essentially are really now looking at making this transition in 2 years. By 2020, our goal is to get that limo from CNG to all-electric and start being zero emission in downtown. And then we talked about this parking, minimum parking requirements as mentioned. From a planning perspective, it doesn't really make sense to have minimum parking requirements the way that we do them now because of the disruption in technology. One thing Orlando's positioned ourselves is to be a leader in R&D and testing for autonomous electric vehicles, and it's coming very, very quickly down the pipe. You don't realize it, but we've had a level of autonomy in our cars for about a decade. Cruise control, that's level 1. Level 2 is now self-parking and lane stability, which we see in almost every standard car that you buy now. That's level 2 autonomy. Level 3 autonomy is where you're taking your hands off the wheel in the city and it's actually driving using communications with the traffic signals. Level 4 is you take your mind off of it and essentially it's doing everything from highway to in-city driving. And level 5 is driverless, no steering wheel, right? There's actually 5 levels of autonomy. We're already at 2 and it's 2018. By 2040, 50% of the vehicles are supposed to be driverless level 5 autonomous vehicles. By 2040, that's actually not that far out. By 2025, all of these auto manufacturers are basically saying this is going to come standard. Level 3, level 4 will come standard. You could use it if you want it or not, and it's going to inevitably move in that direction. So Orlando said we need to be essentially a test center for the country, and we became one of 10 cities selected by the DOT, the US DOT, to test these vehicles. And this was the partnership. We even came out to Brevard. We got NASA and the port on board. We got the CFX Highway, I-4, Florida Turnpike Enterprise, the airport, our transit authority, the city, Florida Polytechnic, UCF. We basically built the best team that you could possibly go after this grant for, and we won. And the whole thing now is simulation. We're actually doing this in the lab right now, simulation of autonomous vehicles and how it'll affect transportation and safety of bicyclists and pedestrians. And coming very soon, it's actually being built as we speak. You can go to the website suntracks.com to see it. This is a 2.5-mile, almost Daytona Speedway loop to test buses that are autonomous, 18-wheelers that are autonomous, vehicles, bicycling, pedestrian, you name it. We're actually testing already 18-wheelers that are platooning through connected technology that are basically hooking up like trains, and they're going down the road saving up to 30% of the fuel that they're using because they're drafting each other. It's an efficiency standpoint, right? So last area of focus is solid waste, and I haven't really heard a lot mentioned about solid waste, but it's a big deal for us. I mentioned people come, they use waste, and they go back home, and we have a lot of it. So we have our traditional residential recycling program and commercial recycling program. That's pretty standard. That's a low-hanging fruit. We've started to crack the nut on downtown recycling. And you would think that this is easy, but the hardest part is paying for the ongoing collection of that recycling. The payment of the collection is very difficult to figure out financially. And we've had to get really creative, taking solid waste revenues from enterprise funds and basically helping to pay for the ongoing collection in public spaces. And been able to work with the attorneys to allow that, because normally you can't spend enterprise fund dollars outside of the actual service that these people are paying for, right? So public space recycling, though, we made the case, is a public good, not only for tourists, but for those who live there, who are paying that fee for service, right? So we have these big belly trash compactors. You've probably seen them. They're smart cans. They have solar panels on top to provide compaction to the waste. They also provide real-time information about how full the actual bins are, so we can get smart about the frequency of collection. Of course, we don't want to pick up a bin every single time if it's only a tenth full every single day, right? Leave that for 3 or 4 days, pick up this one that's, by a hotspot every single day, and that helps save money, right? But Organics are really the 80,000-pound gorilla in waste, though. Organics. Over 40% of what we throw away into the trash can is organic waste that could be repurposed. So we've done two things to address this. One is a residential backyard composter program we launched with a campaign called Get Dirty with Your Valentine. Believe it or not, that's what the campaign was. It was for Valentine's Day, and it said Get Dirty with Your Valentine, and it was all about getting a composter. I'll tell you, 5,500 homes are now using the composter, right? The whole point is we decided we pay as a city the county to tip our waste into the landfill. We pay $35 a ton. It's a lot of money. What we found is these bins, manufactured in Canada, for $35 if we buy 500 of them at a time. They're 10-year warranty. They divert a ton of waste in 3 to 4 years. So I convinced the solid waste director to basically purchase, let's try a truckload of these things and see how far they go. And now we have 5,500 of these bins that are literally have been given out as of this past month, and homeowners get them for free. You literally sign up on a website, we assemble them and deliver them to your door with a whole information packet, which I'm happy to share, videos online that we've done. The whole idea is build a culture of people who properly divert food waste away from the landfill, right? A lot of people ask, well, why don't you just do a curbside pickup like Portland? Well, if I did that, we'd probably get a huge amount of contamination in that bin because people don't know how to properly compost. Start with these, then we'll evolve, right? That's the vision. The other thing is commercial food waste. Hotels, restaurants in Orlando, we're the hospitality hub of the country. So we launched a commercial program where we have carts and trucks that we go around and we basically collect that, and we've done 2 million pounds. And you asked about the composting. We take this to an anaerobic digester in Central Florida. It's the Reedy Creek Improvement District. And the digester takes all of this organic food waste, they take wastewater sludge, and they take fog, or fats, oils, and grease from restaurants, and they combine it in this homogeneous mixture over here. And that creates biogas through anaerobic microbes, right? And that is burnt into a turbine to make electricity. So we're taking food waste and all of this waste, we're making power onto the grid. The actual solids after the gas is outfitted is turned into fertilizer, and we sell it to the local farms to produce more food waste that actually fills that whole system, right? So it's a closed loop system. The goal for us is not to produce power. We have a utility company, right? So you're like, why are you producing power? The goal for us is to make enough power, enough biogas to compress into CNG and run all of the solid waste fleet, which is now CNG, off of food waste. Imagine a closed loop system where everything you're collecting is taken back to this facility to make biogas, to compress into CNG, to pump right into the truck, and it goes back out to collect, right? That's a fully sustainable waste system. So, all in all, this is just 4 of the 7 pillars that I look over and the strategies. I think we have a real opportunity to make Orlando the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And I think that's the vision that Mayor has instilled in us. We have innovation and creativity as part of this culture, and not just Orlando, but bringing in Brevard as a region, we can really create a sustainable model for other regions around the state and other regions around the country. So thank you very much for indulging me.